All right, 1 second. All right, so we're going holding by the Book of Leviticus chapter 18. Again, we're going holding by the Book of Leviticus chapter 18. We're still in verse 3. We might actually finish it today. I'm not sure, but again, we're going holding by the Book of Leviticus chapter 18, verse 3. And the Torah says again, "Kemais eretz Mitzrayim, sheyeshavtem ba lo ta'asu. Kemais eretz Canaan, sher ani mevi eschem. Shama lo tasu b'chukoseim lo selechu." Right. So here the Torah says, again, Torah says the ways, the deeds, the land of Egypt, where you live, you shall not go after them. You shall not do them. Right. And after these, the land of Canaan, where I'm going to bring you, neither shall do them. Should work on their ordinances, etc. So spoke about the idea that the land of Egypt was worse than any other land, right? And Rashi makes that clear, where the Kliyakar asks, so because they're worse, that means if you have lands where the Jews would be that aren't as bad, that means you could go after, their deeds, right? Obviously, that wasn't the case. We saw that in the Kliyakar. We also saw about not going to the theaters, their race courses, etc. So whatever, we spoke quite a bit about that. We're finishing up. My Rebbe here says Mori Rebbe Rav Agon Moshe should be well. Brings down in Tam Vadas. Right, brings down in it brings down in Tam Vadas. And he says, we said last week that he was talking about going in their ways, about watching TV, reading, second newspapers or books of romance books, those type of things. Don't do that, and don't go after desire, right? So we spoke quite a bit about that. Spoke quite a bit about that last week, and he brings down one other point, which I think is an interesting point, and that is, he says that the Ramah, Moshe Isserus, who has his glosses on the Shulchan Aruch, has a commentary on the Code of Jewish Law for Ashkenazim, and he says in Yeridea, Siman Kufayin Ches, 178. Yeridea, no one wants to look it up, is in 178, and he says like this: it's talking about laws of non-Jews, right? By non-Jewish milk, non-Jewish customs, other things, right? So he says like this. He says that what is the essence of why it's forbidden? Why is it forbidden not to go in the way of the Egyptians, right? Or not go in the way of the Canaanites, right? Or other nations for that matter, right? Maybe, as Rashi said, maybe they're worse than other nations, but in general, why is it prohibited? Why is it forbidden? Right, so he says the essence of why it is forbidden, he says, is either something they were knowing with preachers, something they do, they have custom, let's say, for the sake of immorality, or it's their law. Let's say they have a law, whatever the law may be. There's no reason behind it. In other words, they make a law, I don't know, whatever the law is, and you got no reason behind it. No reason why, that law should be that law. Again, we spoke with this idea about law of the land and what happens if the law of the land contradicts Torah, right? Spoke about that. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit more. But in either case, he has like this. He says either they do something for the sake of immorality. In other words, they have a custom for immorality, right? Or let's say they do something, or They make a law, and it's got a reason, right? There's no purpose, no reason behind this law. So he says that is a simple explanation of what the verse means. Because the Torah says, Bechukosehem, right? What does Bechukosehem literally mean? And their laws, right? In their laws. That's what it literally means, right? In their laws. Now, he points out something interesting. What did the Torah not say? The Torah did not say minhagim. Do not go according to their customs. That's what the Torah could have said, right? Torah for sure could have told me, don't go in their customs, whatever their customs are. But what did the Torah say? Very specifically, right? Here, again, as the Torah says, it says, "Kemais the Eretz Mitzrayim, asher yashavtem ba lo tasu," right? Don't do the actions like the people in Egypt, what the Egyptians did. Again, Kemais the Eretz Canaan, asher ani mevi eschem, and the laws or the actions of the Canaanites, I'm going to bring you there. Don't do them. Lo tasu, and then it says, Bechukosehem lo selechu. Says, do not go in there, go in their ordinances. Right? That's how we translate. A chok is a law we don't understand. But it says, don't go in their ways. Don't go in their ordinances. Now, it says, Moed Rebbe over here, what could he have said? Sorry, what could the Torah have said? The Torah could have said, Lo taseh minhagim. Don't go according to the customs. Why did it say their laws specifically? Right? They wanted to say there are two reasons here. Either, again, it's something for immorality. They want you to do things, for moral purposes. Or it's a law, an ordinance, that no purpose and no reason behind it. Because the reality is, it says don't go in their laws. It didn't say, it could have said, but it didn't. Could have said don't go according to their customs. That's what it could have said. Yeah. So here my Rebbe explained, he says things that have a benefit, and there's a reason behind it. Right? It's not forbidden. There's a benefit. Okay, very good. So if I have a benefit, then what? Then what? If I have a benefit, not forbidden. Because there's a benefit. But he says, what about their clothing? So what about the clothing that they wear? He says the clothing that they wear, better for a Jew to separate from the non-Jews and wear different clothing. One of the things the Medrash says that how the Jewish people survive in Egypt, they changed their names, didn't change the clothing, right? And they kept Rosh Chodesh, right? They didn't change the clothing. They didn't look like everybody else, right? One of the worst things a Jew can do is look like everybody else. That does not distinguish us from the nations, right? By food distinguishes us by the nation. By holiday distinguishes us from the nations. Why not clothing? Why should we dress like that? So again, this gets to the whole thing about externals, right? Not necessarily big into externals, but if you want to identify with a certain community, you dress a certain way. So people are more modern Orthodox, let's say, they'll dress like non-Jews. They won't wear white and black, white shirt, black pants, with or without pinstripes, or dark gray, with or without pinstripes, or dark boots. It's very easy for a guy to shop, right? With or without pinstripes, let's say. So they're different, right? Other Orthodox Jews look different. They wear a jacket, they wear a suit, they wear a hat, whatever it may be. Now, a person's more modern. Will they wear t-shirts? Could be. Will they wear bright yellow shirts? Maybe. Yeah. They're going to wear white and black? No. Right? So what distinguishes them between themselves and non-Jews? You say, wait a minute. What do I care what they wear? As long as it's not something forbidden. What do I care what they wear? They keep kosher. That distinguishes them. They keep Shabbos, hopefully. That's what distinguishes them. Yeah. Should we get so excited about clothing? right? We've spoken about this before, right? Our externals like that important. So whatever, we'll take it a step further. Chochmas Adam, one of the great commentators more than 150 years ago, brings the following. He says, in the days of the Vilna Gaon lived about 350 years ago in Vilna, right, in Lithuania. And he says, in the days of the Gra, days of the Vilna Gaon, they made a decree on Malbushe Yisrael. In other words, the non-Jew said, you can only wear certain clothing. We don't want you to wear this clothing, you got to wear this clothing. Yeah? They made a decree. Jews had to wear certain clothing. So the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, a blessed memory of Elijah Vilna, what did he say? He poskined, and he said, it's Yahareg v'Ayavor. What does Yahareg v'Ayavor mean? Means you should give up your life rather than transgress. Now, someone's going to say, wait a minute. Aren't there only certain commandments you have an obligation to give up your life for rather than die anytime, any place? Right? What's one of them? Immorality. What's the second one? Idolatry. What's the third one? Murder. Right? The Jew or non-Jew put a gun to your head and say, I want you to bow down to this guy in the stick, right? A reference to JC, or short little fat guy, Mr. Buddha himself. They probably would call him Fatso, big mitzvah to make fun of idolatry. They say, hey, bow down to Fatso or die. You got to be willing to die, right? That's what it means. Yaharek v'Ayavor. You die rather than transgress. Now, what happens if you don't? What happens if you say, okay, I'll bow down? Yeah. What happens if they bow down? They transgress the Torah prohibition. What's the Torah prohibition? You didn't sanctify God's name. Right? We don't want to have to go through this. Yeah. But if it comes to that, kiss the cross or die. You have to be willing to die. You have to be willing to die. So that means, in this case, for the big three, anytime, any place. Right? Anytime, any place, this would happen. You have to be willing to die. If not, you transgress the Torah prohibition of sanctifying God's name. Now, we're not interested in going through this, but if we have to, we will. Right? As Rabbi Kiva said, I got to the verse, Hashem Elokecho, right? You love the Lord your God. We say in the Shema, B'chol lavavcho, B'chol nafshecho, B'chol meodecho. With all your heart, with all your soul, right? And Kol meodecho means with all your might, with all your strength. Some say it means with all your money. Whatever it is. Let's go back to nafshecho. When the Torah says that you have to love the Lord your God with all your soul. According to Rabbi Kiva, Gemara in Bracha says, Rabbi Kiva says, I was waiting my whole life to be able to sanctify God's name. Yeah, I was waiting my whole life because he came to the verse. He says, B'chol nafshecha. And B'chol nafshecha means you got to be willing. You got to wait. And the whole ideal is what? Sanctify God's name. Not that you're living for that. So you're going to say, well, doesn't it sound like Christianity? No. Why not? Because we're not saying someone came to die for your sin. If you're in a situation where they say kiss the cross or die, then you have to be willing to die. Right? Everybody has to be willing to die. But he said, I've been waiting my whole life. I've been waiting my whole life for this. Yeah? And then he got caught teaching Torah in public. And they take him out to be killed. Now, when they take him out to be killed, he was giving a sermon to his students. Right? And he was explaining, I've been waiting my whole life for this. So his student said, Rebbe Ad Khan, this is what it means. Right? So as they are flaying his flesh, and carving him up, he says, this is what it means. And then he said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Right here, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And then he died. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Kiva is muchen, is welcome in the next one. All right, a lot of questions on this story, but not everyone agreed with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said, I've been waiting my whole life for this. What did others say? Okay, if, it's one of the big three, that you have to give up your life for. Okay. Doesn't mean I'm waiting to do that. That doesn't mean I have to wait to do that. But at the same time, if it happens, what's the obligation? According to the Torah, you got to die. And if you don't, you transgress the Torah prohibition, sanctifying God's name. Right? So over here, not everyone agrees with Rabbi Akiva. Okay. Now comes along the Vilna Gaon. Why did I mention that? Because the Vilna Gaon says over here they made a decree. In the time of the Vilna Gaon, they made a decree on their clothing. They had to wear different clothing. So the Vilna Gaon said, can't do it. You're not allowed to wear this clothing. It's forbidden. You have to give up your life first. Now, there are times where a person would have to give up their life, even if they would tell you, we want you to wear a certain type of shoelaces. Let's say, black shoelaces or red shoelaces or, whatever it may be. Now, if they're doing this because they want to make fun of you, you don't have an obligation to give up your life. No obligation. But if they're doing it because they want you to go against your religion, if they're doing it because they want you to go against your religion, you have to die. Right? You have to give up your life. So here, changing of clothing, it's not going against their religion. I mean, maybe it is. All right, in this case, it is. Okay. But it's going in the ways of non-Jews. Now, he's telling you a novel idea here. Right? If they're going to force you to go in their ways, then you have to give up your life. What's the question? Right? What's the obvious question? That's not one of the big three. But sometimes if they're doing it to have you go against your religion, then even something minor like shoelaces, you may have to give up your life for. But okay, let's see what Rabbi Meir said. The Vilna Gaon said, let's say better, the Chachmas Adam said, in the time of the Vilna Gaon, they made a decree on Jewish clothing. In other words, they couldn't wear what they wanted. They couldn't wear their normal clothing. They had to wear different clothing. So comes along the Vilna Gaon, from Elijah Vilna, blessed memory, says the Vilna Gaon, got to give up your life. You got to sanctify God's name. You got to give up your life. What do you mean? What do you mean? Because having them change clothing wasn't just we want you to wear different clothing. Yeah. What was behind what they wanted? They wanted them, the Jewish people, to go against their religion. That's what they want. That's what they want. So in other words, if they say, do this, not that they're going to kill you. They're not going to kill you. They're saying do this, and they want you to change. They want you to be like them. So said the Vilna Gaon, that's how I go Yavor. That's going against my religion. When it comes to going against your religion, you have to give up your life. What's the case? Cases like this. If a non-Jew or a Jew, doesn't matter, would put a gun to your head and say, I want you to pluck this blade of grass on Sabbath, which is forbidden to do. Yeah? Now, the question is, why are they doing it? If they're doing it to make fun of you, you don't have to give up your life. If they're doing it because they want you to go against your religion, you have to give up your life. But this isn't one of them. This is not one of them. Yeah? Because the Vilna Gaon held, though, they want you to go against your religion over here. So according to the Vilna Gaon, you have to give up your life. Because they want you to change clothing, you have to give up your life. Right? And that, on my Rebbe, says not so simple. Why is it not so simple? Because others disagree. That's not necessarily going against your religion. Right? Some say it is. Maybe some say it's not. Right? So who says you have to give up your life? The Vilna Gaon held clear. You have to give up your life. You have to give up your life for such a thing. So he said maybe. He said to answer this up, maybe it's dependent on what the non-Jew over here wants. If he wants you to go against your religion, he wants to try and uproot your religion, then everyone agrees. But everyone agrees that you have to give up your wife, right? It's status of Yareg al Yav. You have to give up your wife. Yeah. Or if they're what if they want? They only want Jews to wear similar clothing like non-Jews. Right? To show there's no distinction between Jews and non-Jews. Yeah. In that case, he says the same thing. Says the same thing. Right? You have to give up your life. Now, why is that so crucial? Why would something like this be so crucial? You'll say, what's the big deal about what a person wears? Now, again, if you tell me, you're wearing, fire red, let's say, which certainly for a woman would be a problem. Yeah, probably guys also probably an issue. Right? Okay, so that's something of immodest. Good. Right? That's not something modest. Right? Something very bright. Right? Something that's red. Okay. Right? But why be so stringent over here by the fact they want you to wear the same type of clothes? What is inherent in clothing? Yeah. That some would say it's such a severe thing that you have to give up your life. Now, again, if it's something, as the Vilna Gaon said, or my Rebbe here understands, they want you to go against your religion. That's clear. Right? That would be 100% clear. And it doesn't matter. They want you to wear white shoelaces. You normally wear black. Yeah? They want you to uproot your religion. Very good. Yeah? But he takes it a step further. Not just that. They want you to be like them. So they make decrees like this that Jews have to wear similar clothing to non-Jews. Now, a person may say, from the outside looking in, a person may say, so do it. It's a big deal. What are we going to get all bent out of shape about? Yeah? So they'll wear the same clothes. Right? Someone could say, well, they make them do that, they'll make them do other things. Maybe. Right? Maybe they'll make things worse, like in Volozhin, in the mother of all yeshivas. That's, the way we learn today comes from Rav Chaim of Volozhin's yeshiva. The way, that he taught and brought down how we're supposed to learn. Yeah. That yeshiva shut down because the Rosh made it very hard for them in general. Made it very hard for Jews to keep Torah mitzvahs in any case. But what was the straw that broke the camel's back over here? They wanted 1 hour a week. I think it was 1 hour a week, or maybe 1 hour a day. It might have been 1 hour a day. The government wanted, yeshivas and other schools as well to teach Russian language. Now, let's think about it. If, or we're going to shut you down. So let's say that you have to have a language requirement, but they're not gonna accept Hebrew. Yeah, they want you to learn Russian. Very good. They want you to learn Russian. They say, what's so bad? An hour a day. So bad. But they understood right now it's only Russian. 2 weeks from now, what are they going to want us to teach? Evolution? Same-sex marriages? What are they going to want us to teach? They said it's not going to end there. So the fact they said it's not going to end there, they shut down the yeshiva, rather than expose the students to other things that are 10 times worse. Because you say learning is, maybe learning Russian come in handy. I don't know, maybe. But again, that's one of the things that distinguishes the Jewish people. It's why, you have Hasidim speak Yiddish, right? They don't want to speak Hebrew, right? It's not Lashon Kodesh the way they speak it here, in other places. So Yiddish is a much more holy language. Spoken about that also. But They want to speak like everybody speaks, right? That's what makes a Jew a Jew. So you have people in the States. I mean, they barely speak English. Yeah, I know someone's father, or whatever, was in the States. Whatever, lived in the States, and blessed memory, and his wife took care of whatever he needed. He was busy, learning all day, etc. He didn't speak English. I think he understood English, but definitely didn't speak it. Yeah, he wasn't interested in speaking it, or learning it. What do I need to learn it for? It's a trade language. What do I need it for? Right? He goes, hey, but I can help you in life, this and that. His life was in a base bedroom. His life was in the study hall. That was his life. What do you need English for? Yeah, I once asked my Rebbe of Rabbi White, I forget what his first name was. Minchas Yitzchak, I guess it's Yitzchak. Yeah, Yitzchak Weiss. He was the head of the base where my Rebbe's the head of now, many, many years ago, but he was a Rav in England. I forget if it's in Gateshead or Manchester. I forget exactly where it was. In either case, he wrote a set of question and answers in all aspects of Torah, whether it was about the holidays, about kashrus, about loss damages, other things. You see from his books, he understood English because he put English words in there, right? Or someone put English words in there. In either case, he understood English, right? It shows that he had some level of understanding, of English. So I asked my Rebbe once. I said, did you ever hear him speak English? Because my Rebbe's mother tongue is Yiddish, right? The second language is English, and the third language is Hebrew. He speaks other languages also, but I think that's pretty much the order. I think his English probably better than his Hebrew. But either way, Yiddish is his mother tongue. So I asked him. I said, "Did you ever hear him speak? Did you ever hear him speak English?" He goes, "Not in your life." I said, "Never heard him speak English." He said, "Don't think he didn't understand. He understood English. 100% he understood English." He said, "Never spoke it." Right? Never spoke it. Or he never heard him speak it. Either way. Right? So language also something. Right? Has an effect on a person. Can have an effect on a person. But anyway, what's the second reason here? First reason is that they want you to go against your religion. They're changing your clothing because they want you to go against your religion. Yeah. That's the reason to give up your life. Because that's coming to uproot religion. Very good, or really not so good, but okay. But he gives a second reason. Yeah, he said, or what's their intention? And we'll flesh this out a little bit. What's their intention? For Jews to dress like non-Jews. That there shouldn't be any distinction between Jews and non-Jews. Now, you'll tell me, as we said before, the Medrash says, right? The Medrash says, what kept the Jewish people together in Egypt? What kept them together? The way they dressed. They didn't change their clothing. They didn't change their Jewish clothing. They changed their names, right? A few other things. Okay. But you see over here that clothing and looking like non-Jews is bad. That you can't distinguish Jew from non-Jew. Now again, in the bigger scheme of things, from the outside looking in, someone will say that's ludicrous. That's the craziest thing I ever heard. What difference does it make you wear an Izod, a polo, a white shirt, a blue shirt? What difference does it make? Right? In the bigger scheme of things. Does it make any difference? Really doesn't make any difference? Your body's covered. Yeah, your arms are covered. Yeah. Wasn't, your legs are covered. You're modest. Very good. You're not wearing anything bright. Okay. Yeah. There aren't any modesty issues, let's say. So what's the problem? Right? If you're a modern Orthodox Jew, you'd laugh at this. You say, okay, it's true. The Medrash says they didn't change their clothing. Yeah. They didn't change their clothing. But why can't I dress like them? Why is that going in their way? Why is that, as the Vilna Gaon over here says, why is that the status of Yareg al Yavor? Gotta give up my life. For what reason? So what if I wear a blue shirt? Now you can tell me, they want you to wear a blue shirt because they want you to be they want you to be go against your religion. Okay, that I hear. Even a modern Orthodox Jew would say, okay, got to give up my life. Like the Vilna Gaon said, don't have a choice. Got to give up my life. Yeah. But if they want you to wear clothing that makes them just like them. So the $1 million question, or $1.5 million question, we'll up the ante. The $1 million question is that trying to uproot their religion? And what's my Rebbe over here saying? Yes. Why is that uprooting? Why is that considered uprooting your religion? Well, let's go back in time. You go back to the Greeks. Now, the Greeks made decrees against Jewish people. They made some harsh decrees. But the Greeks were not interested in these harsh decrees annihilating the Jewish people. Not like the Babylonians, not like the Russians, not like every other anti-Semite out there. That's not what the Greeks wanted. The Greeks were not interested in annihilating the Jewish people, killing them, torturing the Romans. I forgot the Romans. Yeah. That wasn't their goal. They made harsh decrees. They made some harsh decrees. Okay. What was their main goal? Their main goal was, we want you to be like us. We want you to be Hellenized. Now, we're living in a Greek world. The way we study, secular studies, the arts, the other things. We live in a tremendously Greek world today, even though the Greeks don't exist anymore. Yeah. Even though that world power are totally gone. Yeah. But we live in that world. Okay. Right? So their goal, beyond the shadow of a doubt, was, we want you to go to our schools. We want you to eat our food. We want you to marry our women. Right? Okay, these things are bad. Yeah. But essentially, even without transgressing major thing, what did they want more than anything else? They want Jews to be like non-Jews. That's what they want. Go to their schools, go to their gymnasiums, watch their ball games, right? Read their books, be exactly like that. Right? And so, isn't this what the anti-Semites, Jew and non-Jew, say? If we're different, right? Moshe Mendelssohn, if we're different, non-Jews are going to hate us. So you want to do whatever you want in your house. You want to be, an ultra-Orthodox fanatic in your house. Great. Do it in your house. When you go outside, look like everybody else. Do what everybody else does. Yeah. And that's destructive. Totally destructive. Because what makes Jews unique? Right? Doesn't the Torah say, I took you out of Egypt? Why did he take you out of Egypt? Distinguish us. Yeah. What's the distinction? What we eat. That distinguishes us between us and non-Jews. God did not take us out of Egypt, take the Jewish people out of Egypt so we could be like them. So we could eat shrimp. We could eat oysters, clams. I don't know. Whatever you want to, all the things that are forbidden. Pig, whatever. He didn't take us out of Egypt for that. Why did he take us out of Egypt? To make us into a nation. Very good. But why did he take us out of Egypt? To give us the Torah. Now, doesn't the Torah make us distinct from everyone else? Right? So again, the Jewish anti-Semites and the non-Jewish anti-Semites, they both agree. They'll say the reason we have so many problems, today, what's the reason? Because we're different. If we would be more like the non-Jews, there wouldn't be any anti-Semitism. Now explain that to Jews in Germany, get rounded up during World War II. And couldn't understand why they rounded them up. They're like, we're just like you. Fought in your wars, go to universities, married your women. What did Hitler, may his name be blotted out, may he rot wherever he is. What did Hitler say? Doesn't matter. You got any Jewish blood, even if it's on the wrong side, you deserve to die. Right? Mass genocide. Mass genocide. But they couldn't understand. They said, okay, wipe out Orthodox Jews. Why are you going to wipe us out? Why do you want to kill us? They're different. That's exactly what they said. They're different. They don't dress like you. They don't eat the same things, right? Isn't what Haman says to Achashverosh about the Jewish people? They don't keep your laws. They don't keep, they don't eat the same thing. They do other things. Same thing is what the anti-Semites say. We're different. And Jewish anti-Semites no different. Absolutely no different. Because if we act like them and we do what they do, they're going to love us. They're going to include us. They'll marry our kids. We'll marry to them. Beautiful. That's not what God wants. What's one of the worst things? One of the worst things that, what's his name? That Napoleon, right? Shorty himself, Napoleon. Yeah. Well, one of the worst things he did. He let the Jews out of the ghetto. What do the Jews do when they get out of the ghetto? Intermarry. Assimilate. It's happened every single time. When the Jews are together, surrounded by themselves, they're intermarried. Right? Or it's very rare that they intermarry. So this is crucial over here, my Rebbe says. The fact is, if you wear the same clothing as non-Jews, then you're no different. Then you're absolutely no different. We say clothing makes the person, but we don't want to get too caught up in externals. But then if you're going to, a person will say, well, I eat kosher. That distinguishes me between me and non-Jews. Yeah, I don't go to the university. I don't do other things they do. I keep Shabbos. I keep festivals. Very good. But you look like them. When you look like them, it's worse. Then you see, as Rabbi here says, there's no difference. And you can't tell the difference. When you have Jews and non-Jews together, you can't tell who the Jews are. That's bad. Right? That is bad. That's what we call over here, Yahareg Yavor, says the Gra. Yeah? You have to give up your life. Because when a Jew acts like non-Jews in the way they dress and other things, and they don't distinguish themselves, they don't show they're different, that's our obligation. They don't show they're different, then you forfeit your life. That's what it is. You forfeit your life. But let's say a Jew doesn't want to do that. Yeah, they don't want to forfeit their life. What is going to happen? They'll give in on this. They'll give in on other things. Next thing you know, there's assimilation and intermarriage. That's what happens, right? It's not a very long process. Because they don't want to be persecuted. They don't want to be different. They want to be like everybody else. Very good. Why shouldn't they be like everybody else? What's the problem? Right? That's exactly the issue. Right? Again, if you're telling me it's about uprooting your religion, 100%, everybody agrees. Everybody agrees you have to die. But there's another factor involved. And that is once they make decrees, they'll make a decree that they want you to dress like them. That's no different if they make a decree and they say they want you to eat pork. They say eat pork or die. Now, that's something you have to give up your life for? No. Not something you have to give up your life for. You can eat it. Right? Again, if they're doing it though, and this goes across the board, anything like this, if they do it because they want you to go against your religion, once it's there to uproot your religion for you to stop being a Jew at that level, or whatever it is, then you have to give up your life. That is something you have to give up your life. So, yeah, I was somewhere, whatever, many, many years ago. And I was just engaged. And my wife made a comment and said, wow, said, we're at a certain thing. And said, you can't make any distinction between the Jews and non-Jews here. Yeah. Well, you don't come from a religious family. People don't dress that way. Okay. Yeah. So how do you know who's Jewish, who's not? You don't. You say, well, maybe, Jews have certain type of noses, other things. There are people who look distinctly Jewish. Okay. But if you don't necessarily look distinctly Jewish, your clothing is not going to give it away. That's for sure. Right? Nobody will know. For sure, nobody will know. You dress in a white shirt, black pants, and you're wearing tzitzis and a yarmulke if you're a guy, well, that'll give it away. That's a pretty good giveaway. Yeah. So that being the case, then there's no difference. If there's no difference between Jews and non-Jews, then why did God take us out of Egypt in the first place? Right? The Torah itself makes clear, after speaking about all the kosher and non-kosher animals, God says, I took you out to distinguish you. Why? For what purpose? The simple explanation, don't eat the same foods that other people eat, that other nations eat. You don't eat these things. Whatever God says you're allowed to eat, good. Whatever he says you're not allowed to eat, also good. Yeah? But you're not going to be like everybody else. So I can take it one step further. Okay, so God's going to distinguish us by the holiday. Good. God's going to distinguish us by food. God's also going to distinguish us by the way we look. And we have to be different. And he says to the extent where this would be something you'd have to give up your life for. Now, if you choose to do it on your own, there's no decree, it's a different issue. That's a very different issue. The issue over here is very clear. The issue is they made a decree. And that decree is for you to be like everybody else and to uproot your religion. That's a decree. So in either case, even if it's something relatively minor, clothing, not such I wouldn't say such a major thing per se. Right? Others may disagree. Okay. It can also be by shoelaces we wear, or different types of shoes. If the goal is for them to make us like them. If that is the ultimate goal. Yeah. Says the Vilna Gaon that what's their goal? Their goal is to uproot religion. If their goal is to uproot religion, yeah, then you have to die. Then you have an obligation of Hareg Yavla. Right? Again, it's not one of the big three. It's not murder, idolatry, or immorality. True. But anytime non-Jews want you to go against your religion, no matter how small or trivial it may be, yeah, person have to give up their life. Why? Because they want you to go against your religion. That's the whole point. That's what they want. So dressing like them, yeah, dressing like them is no different, right? Dressing like them is the exact same thing, right? Because they want you to be like them. So what's the difference? How is anyone ever going to distinguish between you and a non-Jew? Right? So yeah, what about Moses Mendel said? Right? That's exactly what he said. You want to be the most ultra-Orthodox Jew in your house? Great. Don't do it in public. Be like everybody else. Yeah, secular Jew once tells me of a certain place. Yeah, and probably shouldn't have been there in general. But the person says, it's embarrassing to be seen with you in public. Why? The Moses Mendelssohn idea. You want to dress that way in your house, nobody sees you. It's one thing. You're out in public. Okay. People should know what a Jew looks like. You're out in public. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Why is it embarrassing? People may say something. You look too Jewish. That's exactly what Moses Mendelssohn said. Not a new concept. It's for sure not a new concept. Yeah, be like us. You want to come to this thing, be normal. Or someone tells me, an old friend of mine told me, at a hockey game. Yeah, and there's this visibly Orthodox Jew there, right? I mean, seemingly visibly Orthodox Jew. And he's, every time something happens, guys jumping up, screaming and yelling, this and that. And his friend of mine's like pulling him down, like, listen, you're making all us look bad. You can't stand up, block people's, view, this and that. You gotta, if you're gonna be there, don't bring too much attention. Wasn't saying Moses Mendelssohn. Okay, you want to be there, good. You want to dress that way, fine. I don't have a problem with it, but if you're gonna jump around and yell and scream, and you're blocking people's view and kind of being obnoxious and other things, that makes us look bad. Yeah, forget about whether you should have been there or not. That's a whole other issue. But if you're gonna be there, don't distinguish yourself. You want to look the part, people look at you, whatever, that's fine, right? I don't have an issue with that. But if you're gonna, yell and scream and block people's views and this and that makes you look bad. Yeah, it makes all Jews look bad. Yeah, let me take some questions here. Somebody asked, whatever, there's a lot of questions here. One, someone died on Kiddush Hashem. Yeah, do they get Olam Haba? Good question. They should, right? If they are killed, if they are killed, if they are killed because they're a Jew. Now, some will say, I don't know, if there is a source for this or not. Some will say that you have to be given a choice. You absolutely have to be given a choice. In other words, do this or die, right? Or we're going to kill you, right? They end up killing you. That's sanctifying God's name. In other words, you have to be given a choice. If you're not given a choice, right? If you're not given a choice and, you're killed for the sake of being a Jew, terrorist attack. Why? Terrorist attack. Why are they, why are they killing you? Right? Or why are they trying to hurt you? Let's say, God forbid, they kill you, right? The person gets killed, right? What's going on? Why are they killing you? They're killing you because you're a Jew, right? Now, I have heard it say that if a person dies as a Jew without being given a choice, who says they go straight to Olam Haba? By the people in the Holocaust. Yeah, they weren't given a choice. They absolutely weren't given a choice. People die in terrorist attacks. They're not given a choice. They're just killed. Right? So I have heard some say that they have to be given a choice. And if they're not given a choice, who says they sanctify God's name? Now, others would say not that way. Others would say if they die, they say kiss the cross or die, and you say no, and they kill you. That's sanctifying God's name. That you go straight to Olam Haba. Yeah. But what about if they kill you anyway? They don't give you a choice. I've heard some say there's no source that they should go straight to Olam Haba. That really a person has to be asked. They have to be asked. Right? In other words, if you don't do this, we're going to kill you. And it goes against Torah. You have to, they want to uproot your religion. You have to die. But whatever again, If they give you the choice, that's something different. You go straight to Olam Haba. If they don't give you a choice, they kill you. They kill you without giving you a choice. I've heard some say, you don't go straight to Olam Haba. I don't know why. The claim is there's no source for that. There's no halachic source for such a thing. Yeah, a lot of people will say if they're killed because they're a Jew, they go straight to Olam Haba. Yeah. Right? So I thought that for years. Still probably think that's true. But I've heard some people say there's no source to that. There's no source to that. You have to be given a choice. So I can't say what's true or not true. Right? But I would think, even if there's no source, let's say there's no source. Even if there would be no source at all to say that you would go straight to Olam Haba, if you're not given a choice. Yeah? Right? If you're not given a choice, then what would I say? Yeah, I would say they still should have a portion of the world to come. Others may disagree. Others may say there's no source. There's no source. In other words, if you're killed because you're a Jew, doesn't mean you're guaranteed Olam Haba. You have to be given a choice. So I've heard some people speak very strongly that there is no source. You can't say that. Okay. Yeah. You would ask most people, that's what they would say. That's 100% what they would say. But some would say, but there's no source. Okay. But if they're killed for the sake of being a Jew, logically speaking, if someone is killed for the sake of being a Jew without giving a choice, they shouldn't have a portion of the world covered. They shouldn't go straight to Olam Haba. They're killed for the sake of being a Jew. Someone's killed in terrorist attack. Yeah. Now, it could be, for some people, that death is not a full atonement. Maybe for some people it's a full atonement, some people it's not a full atonement. They have to go through other things before they get to Olam Haba. Maybe. It's kind of complex. People that, were killed October 7th. Yeah. There's a divine decree. We don't understand it. There was a divine decree. Divine decree. You tell me there was a Buddha there. You'll tell me it was, Shmini Atzeres, it was on Shabbos. Simchas Torah is on Shabbos. All kinds of desecration going on. Okay. So there was a divine decree. Very true. They died for the sake of being a Jew. Very true. But is that, in that case, is that enough that their death is 100% atonement? Could be. Very well could be. Yeah, but it also could be maybe they have to go through other things besides that. Right? That could also. So someone asks, based on that question, we're going in as a settler, living as a tzaddik, as someone righteous, as possible. And you end up getting out by perhaps Gene or Arabs, guaranteed the soul direct to Olam Haba. Again, same thing, same question. That is, they're killed for the sake of being a Jew, for the sake of being a settler. They'll say, you don't deserve the land belongs to us, you want to live there, whatever, we're going to kill you, right? And they come and kill them. Again, it's the same thing. Why are they killed? They're killed for one very specific reason. They're killed because they're a Jew. That's the only reason. Yeah, they'll claim, yeah, you stole our land, you did this. No. That's just a claim. But deep down, why are they killing them? Why do these Arabs want to kill Jews? Because they're indoctrinated. Totally indoctrinated. Yeah. So their goal is to kill Jews. Because why? They're Jews. They'll add other reasons. We make Ishmael look bad. We stole their land. Other things. Okay. But what's the real reason? Bottom line. They hate Jews. They don't want Jews in the world. You know how much money, Palestinian Authority pays every month, to families where, the fathers, husbands, grandfathers, whatever, die trying to kill Jews. Still going on, still on the books. You want to put up a Palestinian state with these people in charge? I mean, without getting into politics, their charter hasn't changed. Jews don't deserve to be here. They don't deserve to exist. They don't deserve to exist. They all hold that. There's no, the ones that are radicalized. The ones that are not, the ones that are not radicalized, okay. Right? So they can believe whatever they want to believe in, but they're not radicalized. Very good. So they want peace. Okay. Very good. Yeah, we all want peace. But the majority that are radicalized, they believe beyond the shadow of a doubt we all deserve to die. Right? Now, if they kill you, God forbid, because, they want to say, let's say someone lives in the quote unquote the West Bank. You're a settler. What about people who don't live in the West Bank? What about, air terror attacks, downtown Jerusalem? It's not the West Bank. It's not considered the West Bank. Not even according to them. Not considered part of the West Bank. Well, maybe it is in some ways, right? That they think the land belongs to them. Okay. What about places that are clearly Jewish, that belong to us? Clearly Jewish. Is that going to stop them from killing people there? No. And why wouldn't it stop? Because they believe all Jews should die in the land, outside the land, all the more so in the land. We're occupied. Stole their land. We did all kinds of other things. But they're indoctrinated. So they're going to kill. They're radicalized. They all want to be martyrs. Very good. They want to fight for the cause. Okay. I mean, it's kind of crazy what they do. They'll kill their own people. They'll use them as human shield. They don't care. Life does not mean anything to them. It means nothing. Right? Especially if a guy's going to die, get 70 virgins in heaven. Well, very good. What happens if it's a woman? There were a woman doing bus bombings also, blowing themselves up. I'm like, what do they get? If a guy gets 70 virgins, what does a woman get? Yeah, keep this clean here. In any case, many would say, regardless of whether there's a source or not, many would say if they're killed for the sake of being a Jew, they should have a straight ticket to Olam. Now again, others would say there's no source for that. Okay. Even if there is no source. They're killed for what reason? For being a Jew. Now, the only question is, let's say they're right. Let's say for argument's sake, there is no source. Okay. Now, if they die sanctifying God's name because they're a Jew, yeah, is that death totally atoned for all the sins they did? That's a question. Right? That is a question. And what's the answer? Don't know. Maybe for some people it doesn't. Maybe for some people they still have to go to Gehenna. They still have to suffer. Right? They still have to go through suffering. And then they'll have a portion of the world to come. Right? Others would disagree and say if you die, regardless of whether there's a source or not. Right? Again, let's say for argument's sake, there's no source. Yeah? We have no source for this. It would make sense according to logic if they die without being given a choice. You say, well, maybe if they're given a choice, they'll transgress whatever it is to save their lives. Maybe that's why they're not given a choice in this generation. Because we're a very weak generation. Right? Heard a great rabbi once say that. This generation, we're not going to be given the choice. Kiss the cross or die. Right? You saw it by the Holocaust. There was no choice. Right? We were a very weak generation. Could be God foresaw that if we were given the choice, we wouldn't do it. A lot of people would not sanctify God's name. Be that as it may, I would think, even if there's no source, I would still think, and people say it's a leap of faith, whatever, okay. But I would think if they died, because they were a Jew, that could totally atone for them. Maybe, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it only maybe it atones 80%. They still know they need 20%. Maybe. I mean, it is brought down, that I think from Jews in the Holocaust. Some say they were reincarnated souls from the time of Bayit Sheni, the time of the Second Temple. Yeah, they had to come back and die that way because of what they didn't do during the time of the Second Temple. Yeah, I've heard, whatever. I've spoken about this before. Some Christian took me to task. You really think, some great rabbis have said this. You really think, it's reincarnate? No, someone came to die for your sins, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I mean, souls can come back and be totally slaughtered in a body in order to have their soul fixed up, and that takes care of it, right? So if that would be the case, and that soul comes back, it's okay, I'm willing to go through this, and that's going to fix up my soul by getting slaughtered by an Arab. That's enough. That should be enough, right? But again, I'm just speculating. Maybe it's not enough. Maybe it's a partial atonement. Maybe it's a huge atonement, but it's not a full atonement, right? Again, even if you want to say that, there's no source for it, okay. Even if there is no source, right? If they, maybe it doesn't atone for everything. Maybe I would think it's a major atonement. Major atonement, even if they're not given a choice. Even if they're not given a choice. Masses want Jews to like them. That's true. Also want to dress uniquely. Yeah, you can't have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways. In other words, you can't try and be unique as a Jew if you're dressing like non-Jews. You're going to the universities. You're doing other things with them. How do you stay unique? So you say, doesn't have to be with my clothes. It could be with what I eat. It could be the fact that I keep Shabbos. It could be the fact that, I keep the holidays. Just because I dress a certain way, even if the masses want me to dress a certain way, so what? Yeah, who says that's a bad thing? Everything else, I'm 100% a Jew like everybody else. I'm more ultra-Orthodox than most ultra-Orthodox Jews. I dress differently. Okay. But that says something, right? Now, there are people that have issues. With dress. I'm not here to judge. People have issues in all kinds of things. Yeah. Let's say you have a woman. You have a woman that, according to Jewish philosophy, she's good. She has a ultra-Orthodox outlook. Very good. Yeah, what if she wears miniskirt? Or what if they're too tight, even they go just below the knee or whatever? Yeah. There are people that have modesty issues. They don't have philosophical issues, per se. They're modesty issues. I'm not saying they're wearing bright red and this and that, but if we look at them, again, we're not, it's forbidden to judge by the way someone dresses because you don't know what's in their heart in general. Since you don't know what's in their heart or in their heart, as I would say, right? If you don't know what's in their heart, you can't judge. Maybe they have the best Jewish philosophy out there, but the problem is they have modesty issues. Yeah, and there are people out there like that, right? So, they want to get married, they're going to set them up with, people will get set up with, people that have issues, and philosophically, they're holding the right place. 100% they're holding the right place. Modesty issues they have. They definitely have modesty issues. I'm not saying everybody by any stretch, but you can tell. You can tell the way people dress. Right? So you can't judge, somebody necessarily by the way they dress, but it does say something. Right? If a person wants to fit in the community, you'll dress the way people dress. Right? In the Orthodox community, you'll dress the way they dress. You don't want to stick out. Yeah. So again, you'll say, as we said many times, maybe it's only, just the way people dress. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about who they are. That's not true. We said externals are not the most important thing, but it does say something. Right? Who in general, again, we're very quick to judge, but let's say, a person sees, a woman, let's say she's religious, she prays and does whatever she needs to do, and she dresses a little more provocative, let's say. Yeah. Elbows aren't covered, cleavage showing, short mini skirt, or not so short, but whatever, short enough. You have any idea what's going in their mind? No. Right? Now, judging from the outside, which is always a bad thing to do. It's always a bad thing to do, but what would we think? Either not religious or not so religious. That's what we would think. Why? Because we're very quick to say, well, they don't look like the normal normal girls that came out of Beis Yaakov, right? They don't look like these normal girls because other girls dress a lot differently, right? So the question is, where are they holding? Where are they? Now, it could be, philosophically, they're holding where they need to be in many ways. Why doesn't it come out in the way they dress? Because it could be they have modesty issue. It could be they get caught up in secular society. And in secular society, it's all about showing as much as possible. Right? Women totally trashed. Certainly this generation and last generation also. No question. When I was growing up, no question. Because the way they dress. They want people to look at them. That's why they dress the way they do. They're going to say, I dress any way I want. If people look, it's their fault. Okay, it's true. For a non-Jew, it's less of an issue. For a Jew, it's putting a stumbling block in front of someone. Yeah, a non-Jew doesn't have that, it's not forbidden for them. It's not good. I wouldn't say it's good. But, it's not necessarily forbidden. Women dress a certain way. Again, I'm not saying the guy should do whatever he wants. I'm not saying that by any stretch. There's a guy talking here. Doesn't give a guy to do whatever he wants. Person, can have all kinds of thoughts. He just dress modestly. Okay. But usually if someone's not dressed so modestly, person may think other things. Okay, without even going into all that. But the way a person dresses says something. It definitely says something. Now again, people say, you don't know what's in their heart. True? Very, very true. I don't know what's in their heart. I do know some people, I know what's in their heart. Yeah, but there's an issue. There's some sort of issue because of the secular world and the power of the secular world, the way people dress. And it affects religious people. A person's already, God forbid, on, Instagram, Telegram, or, TikTok or whatever. You have all these things. The way people dress is outlandish. If they have clothes on at all. Yeah. Or, very little. So isn't it easy to get caught up in that? It's easy. It's very easy to get caught up in that. Yeah. But again, if a person has a proper outlook, I would think, not that way. But person gets caught up in it. I'm not going to say it makes sense. I don't have a good answer. Except for the fact that secular society is very powerful. It's extremely powerful. Now, again, if a person buys into the system and everything else, they're not going to have that issue. Right? 100% they're not going to have that issue. They have other issues, maybe. They're not going to have that issue. Right? That issue they won't have. Okay. But there are people that have this issue. They have modesty issues. Right? So if they have issues, let's say, in Jewish philosophy or other things, what's the first thing that they're going to change? Guy or a girl, doesn't matter. If they, have some sort of crisis, let's say, I don't know, spiritual crisis, whatever it may be, right? Or a physical crisis turns into a spiritual crisis, whatever it may be. What's the first thing that's going to change? The way they dress. The first thing. By a woman, it could be multiple body piercing. It could be they start to wear pants or short skirts. Or that's the first thing. First thing that's going to change. By a guy's no different. Be one of the first things to take his yarmulke off. Maybe shave part of his head. Get rid of any, any pays, any sidewalk, whatever. He wants to be like everybody else because they're struggling. Guys that struggle, the women struggle. There are a lot of different reasons. That's not the point. Right? That's not the point. The point is that on the inside, now there is something wrong here. Because if there wasn't anything wrong, then why would they be dressing the way they do? Right? So there is something going on. There is definitely something going on. But you can have people that, this thing itself, they struggle with. They definitely struggle with. Right? But they can have the best philosophy. They can still have very good philosophy and struggle with it. Right? I know it sounds like an oxymoron. It doesn't sound like it's real. But there are plenty of people out there who struggle with it. And that's, it's the first thing that goes is dress. But Someone says its criteria, what constitutes uprooting, right? They want you to be like that. That means Orthodox Jews will have to give up their life rather than go to the army. So there's an issue. There is an issue. Spoke about this last night in Pirkei Avos. That there is an issue where the army very clearly wants ultra-Orthodox Jews to be like secular Jews. That's what they want. Now, they'll disguise it and claim it has to do with share the burden, right? Because 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and 10 years ago, there wasn't an issue over here. Yeah. Well, I mean, they've been trying to do this for a long time, but why wasn't there an issue? Because they didn't need them. They don't need the numbers. Now, today, people would say that's changed because of what happened October 7th. Yeah. That's changed. So maybe they need more numbers. Okay, let's say that's true. Right? But, before that, that wasn't the case. That for sure wasn't the case. Now, they'll make the claim. They will absolutely it's a very volatile issue, right? But they'll make the claim, why my kids have to suffer, why they have to go through this and you don't, right? And your kids don't or whatever, right? So they'll make the claim, share the burden. Okay. But if they don't need the numbers, let's say they don't need more people. I had somebody 30 years ago, probably more than 30 years ago almost, that he had a fight to get in the army. I mean, literally, he had to bang their doors down to take him. Okay, he was a modern, a religious Zionist. Okay, he wanted to do the army, American, whatever, came to live here. He wanted to do the army, wanted to, do his share. But he had a fight to get in. They didn't want him. They didn't need him. He wasn't going to make any issues. He was, modern Orthodox, whatever, fine. But he had to fight his way in. He eventually went in. Okay. But they didn't need him. And it's been going on for the last 20 years, 25 years even, more. That's all. It's gone on for a very long time. Only recently, right? Let's make very clear. Only recently has that changed? Has that status quo changed? Yeah. So, okay. So now you have a different issue. Now let's say you need more people. Let's say. What about all the years you didn't need people? Why are you trying to force us to go in? Because you're going to tell me it's share the burden, right? You're going to tell me it's share the burden, but you don't need us. Now, if you had 100,000 Orthodox Jews go in, let's say, if they would go in, the army would not know what to do with them. Again, you have separate units for other Orthodox Jews, very good, right? The religious Zionist Jews, whatever. Okay, if you took 100,000 people, or even 50,000 people, army would not know what to do with them. They would have no clue what to do with them. Where to put them, clothing, other things. They would not know what to do. So up until this point, there's never been a need. But they keep coming back and saying, you have to, share the burden. But they don't need them. So what's the idea of share the burden? I get it. Other people have to serve. You also have to serve. Very good. You don't need them. So why do you want them to serve? It's going to be harder for the army to take all these people. Yeah. So why would you want to do that? Suicide in a certain way. Why would you want to do that? What's the answer? Because they want them to be like them. That's what they want. It's exactly what they want. They want them, they want them to be like them. So my Rebbe said many years ago, many years ago, he said, where at that time, it was a Milchemes Reshus, there was no obligation here. We weren't at war, it's been the last couple years. And you tried to take us and do this and do that and want us to be like you. And that's where we didn't have an obligation. There was no obligation, right? So we're not going to give you one. Because of that, we're not going to give you one. And that's the stance. That has been the stance, of the ultra-Orthodox community, not the religious Zionist community, obviously. Right? But, if they want you to go into a place where, you're going to be like them, you're going to hear what they say, it's going to have totally detrimental effects. So yeah, that should also be Harigo Yahu. So you got people now they're looking for quote unquote draft dodgers to put him in jail. Right? They're going to show an example. Show an example. You don't want to do the army, we're going to put you in jail. So you had a mass rally of, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people showing we're not going anywhere. Yeah. But yeah, could be. It's also something you have to give up your life for because they want you to be exactly like them. That's worse. In this case, if you're just telling me it's wearing clothing and you have to give up your life, it's one thing, right? Now, if you're in the regular army, we're not talking, let's say you have a separate unit, but if you're in the regular army, yeah, you mix with men and women. These people are 18, 19 years old, hormones going strong. So, there was, I remember many years ago, when they first started Nachal Haredi, it was an ultra-Orthodox army unit. And someone who came in to my Rebbe's base to the base in there, basically escaped, went AWOL, was in hiding, basically. And this guy said, I was there, heard it with my own ears. Yeah, whatever, it was Shabbos. And the army, they had a separate base or whatever, separate from women. And they brought in like a whole slew of women to their base on Shabbos. Now, that wasn't, accidental. They know exactly what they're doing. People aren't stupid. They know exactly what they're doing. This guy ran away. I don't know what happened to him in the end, but he was saying this is what's going on. It's better now. It's definitely better than it was 25, 30 years ago, for sure. Yeah, that is nothing to talk about. But this is what happened. This is what happened. So you can imagine all the things that, may go on. But I had an argument with somebody, whatever, religious Zionist, back and forth. And finally, my knockout blow was, I said everyone has to do it, and, get over their things. And I said, listen, on the books, a woman in the army, right? They have to serve 3 years, right? Unless they go further, but usually it's 3 years. Every woman in the army has a right to up to 3 free abortions. It's on the books. On the books. This person did their jaw hit the ground after I said that. Because he wasn't hearing anything. Right? Shit, the burden, this, whatever. Right? I said that statement over. Yeah, checkmate. And what are you going to answer to that? I was also someone here a number of years ago, and whatever, they grew up in Israel, self-hated Jew, pretty much. And they asked me all these questions about the Torah Karta. They asked me about, women shaving their heads, other things. And one of the questions obviously came up was this question. Why don't other Orthodox Jews do the army? I did the army. No other people did the army. Yeah, whatever, back and forth, stats, this, that. Finally, whether we get it anywhere, because, it's a very touchy issue. It's a very, very touchy issue. And, I get it. People people sacrifice their lives, and these people aren't sacrificing their lives, but they don't respect Torah. So, okay. So anyway, back and forth. Finally, I used the same argument. I said, if we were together, right, they weren't even if they're in separate units, it's one thing. Yeah, and they're totally separate. But I said, on the books. On the books, a woman is entitled, to up to 3 free abortions. I was like, you're aware of that, right? He's like, we're not even going there. I said, I know, but I'm just mentioning that. I'm not saying all women are doing that. Yeah. But when you have 18, 19-year-old kids, yeah, and they're kids, close proximity and this and that and doing all these things, what do you think? What do you think is going on? I'm saying all the time this and that, but there are things that go on. Right? What do you think goes on in a dormitory, in college? Victor Miller said 50 years ago, it's like a brothel. What do you think is going on? Some more, some less, doesn't matter. That's what it's like. Right? We'll keep it clean here. People willingly doing who knows what. Okay, you're well before that, but it doesn't matter. Isn't that a spiritual danger? So you tell me if they're in separate units, whatever, it's less of an issue. Okay. But don't you think there's influence there? Other things, other things go on. People come in contact. I'm not talking about the danger. Danger's another issue. I'm talking about spiritual danger here. Spiritual danger. So if you're going to tell me, again, this was the easiest argument, right? Up until a few years ago. If you're going to tell me about share the burden and this and that, okay. But you didn't need them. For the last 30 years, you didn't need them. Now, okay, maybe it's a different story. Maybe we don't have that argument anymore. Okay. But what about 30 years ago? What about the past 30 years? They were trying to do the same thing. For what purpose? So again, they're going to claim, which it's a partial claim. It's not a full claim. I mentioned this last night. It's not a full claim. They want share the burden. I get it. That's what they want, but that's not their ultimate goal. The army's ultimate goal is exactly what we said here. The ultimate goal is for ultra-Orthodox Jews to be like secular Jews. That's their goal. That 100% is their goal. So yeah, that would have a din of Harei Yav. You can't do it. You're not allowed to do it. It's a problem. Yeah. But again, look what's going on in the army. So it's easier if you have separate units. Okay. I agree. It's easier. Yeah. Not even, it's easier. But if you have someone mixed in with everybody else, right? I know someone in the army's on, reserve duty every so often. And he had to change groups because the people he said were just disgusting. Totally disgusting. What they spoke about, how they acted. They're not 17, 18-year-old kids. I mean, some of them might be, but the vast majority are not. He says these people are animals. If you don't have Torah, you're an animal. That's it. Right? Kind of controversial to say, but it's true. If you don't have something guiding you what's right and wrong, what differentiates between you and an animal, right? Imagine what Rav Dessler said. Rav Yafi, blessed memory, brought down. All right, I brought this down many times. Spoke on my BJQ podcast. Yeah, and that is what a person says, I can do what I want, right? I can do whatever I want, I'm free. Yeah, an animal can say the same thing, right? Right? That's where you probably lose the person because they go, what, you think I'm an animal? Right? As an animal can say the same thing, I also do what I want. So what differentiates, so Rav Dessler asks, what differentiates you between you and an animal? He asks the question. What's his answer? His answer is, we have the ability to overcome desire. To go against our desire. Animals can't do that. Animals are programmed DNA. They're programmed. They want to eat, they don't want to eat. That doesn't mean they have free choice. They're programmed. So so a person, what differentiates us from animals, not to mention the fact we can reason and make decisions, animals don't, because it's all based on instinct. We can go against our base desire. That's what we can do. That is the single most important thing, differentiates a human from an animal. And if you don't have that, and people just do whatever they want and whatever their desire, wherever their desires take them, and they have no moral backbone for anything. Yeah, they have no moral backbone. So if that's the case, then they're an animal. What's the difference? What is the moral backbone for them? Why won't they cheat on their taxes? Yeah, maybe some will. Why won't they cheat? Because it's a deterrent. You might get caught. Yeah, I'm not talking about illegal loopholes. They'll get caught. Okay, it's a deterrent. Very good. It's a deterrent. But again, you have to remember, years ago, something, what's the difference between actually killing someone and mercy? Right? Euthanasia is known as mercy killing. Why is it mercy? Because the person's suffering. No one should have to go through. Spoke about end of life issues, right? No one should have to go through any of these things. But killing someone or hastening their death, what does it do? Right? What does it do? Beyond the shadow of a doubt, it kills them. Right? 100% it kills them. Now, is there any difference? Is there any difference if you do that or you shoot him in the head? No difference, right? No difference. There's absolutely zero difference. We don't hold this any different. So if we don't hold this any different, yeah, but they're going to say it's not murder. Of course it's not murder. Why wouldn't it be considered murder? Because it's mercy. Person suffering. We don't want them to suffer anymore. Okay, it's a terrible thing to watch someone suffer. But when it's forbidden, let's say to pull someone off a respirator or pull out a trach or something like that, the person will suffocate to death, let's say. When it's forbidden to do, that's murder. Or you hasten someone's murder. Yeah, you cut off someone told me this, I was at a mortar's house. So yeah, my father was suffering, it was terrible. So we cut off the pacemaker. So I asked the doctor, I said, was the person going to die? They said, yeah. Now, they cut off the pacemaker, what happened? They said instead of dying in like 6 hours, it died in 2 hours. That's murder. Now, they're going to claim it's mercy. Again, nobody should be in this situation. But people are going to claim it's mercy. Why is that mercy? Because they don't want the person to suffer. Okay. Maybe they're suffering because that's going to be their own haba. That's going to be their portion of the world to come. Right? But who gives us the right to play God over here and say, well, we know what's best, we're going to kill you. Really? So someone, I mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago, someone's cognitive reflexes start to go. They can't play Sudoku anymore, right? The brain's kind of sort of turned to mush. Yeah? Kill them? Put them out the pasture? I think some people would say yes. Don't put them, put them in hospice. Just let them go. That's not quality of life. Right? But I understand people say, well, I wouldn't want to live like that. Okay. Yeah, that doesn't give you a right to kill them. I know someone in this situation, over 90, fell, broke his neck, is basically paralyzed. They did put in a trach, whatever, but, their spouse doesn't want them to die. They don't want them to die. Quality of life, can't really do much. Smile, right? Brain is probably going to mush a little bit. I mean, it's been going to mush for a little bit now. For the last number of years. Okay. But they're not brain dead. Brain dead is something totally different. It means you have no function at all. That's a different issue. And that's a whole different of opinion whether you go by brain death or by the heart. The heart starts beating. Right? Where the heart's beating, but the brain's gone. Right? That's a difference of opinion, but that's not the point. Point is quality of life. Give someone the right to say quality of life. I get it, they don't want to live like that. Okay. So you could say, well, when your cognitive, device, when you go and, cognitive, devices start to decline, let's say. So then, okay, so we'll put you out the pasture. Can't play Sudoku. Can't hear anything too much. Can't see too much. You have no quality of life. So we'll kill you. Right? What's the big deal? Now, I know what they meant. You hear someone say that, it's kind of, it's like saying, well, I have the right to decide who lives or who dies. Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem. If a person's alive, the brain's alive, who said you can kill them? Now, it doesn't mean they have to take everything, every preventative medicine to keep them alive. They don't have to do that. They can choose if they want to go on a respirator or not. That's a different issue. Once you put them on, you can't necessarily take them off. I mean, it's complex. Right? Again, I spoke about this a few weeks ago, but still, well, how do you define quality of life? See, that kind of irks me. You're going to say, what's quality of life? Well, they can't do very much. Okay, but still, all right? They're not brain dead. They're brain dead's a different issue. But they're not brain dead. But they don't function. Okay. According to you, they don't function. But they're still in this world. That gives me the right to kill them? Why does that give me the right to kill them? Taking up an extra bed, this, that. Why should we kill them? Now, again, it can get expensive. Keeping them alive, true. Very true. In this case, that's not the case. But, even so, someone to say that, just crass. Just crass. That's what it's even worse than that. right? But it's saying I have the right to decide who lives or dies. Well, who gives you the right? If a person should die, okay, to let them die. Yeah, put them in hospice, whatever. They're never going to get better. This is going to happen. Okay, yeah, there are times to do it. Fine, this ain't one of them. But what's what's the definition of quality of life? They're sitting there not doing anything. Okay, so what? Still alive. I think you're right to kill them. Yeah. Someone here says conscription of sheep boys is absurd. What private all those already have in? Yeah. Whatever, they can train them, but again, it's making much more of a problem, you know, than they need or that they want, right? Again, if this is what they're going to do and 30, 40,000 people they're going to get, what are they going to do with them? What in the world are they going to do with them? They'll go out of their mind. They don't know what to do with them. They'll send them home. They'll send the vast majority home because they don't have place for them. Even if they need them, where are they going to put them? It's a problem. But I'm saying all the more so, if they didn't need them, why are they taking them? Same reason. Right? Exact same reason. Somebody asks, one second. The secular state of Israel is trying to destroy the Torah. Yes. They've been trying to do that for a long time. Yeah, this is not something new. They since the state started, it's been a secular state. If there weren't ultra-Orthodox Jews here and ultra-Orthodox Jews in the government, it'd be a lot worse. Be a lot worse. If you read Herzl Schmerzl's book, The Jewish State, very clear. Very, very clear what he says. He wants a state of Jews. Doesn't mean a religious state. Doesn't want a religious state. But their goal is to uproot Torah. That's their goal. That's always been their goal. There's no, this is not rocket science, not anything new. Their goal beyond the shadow of a doubt has been to uproot Torah. They don't want Torah Jews here. They don't want Torah here. Not interested. Yeah, they don't want roads being blocked off on Shabbos. They want to be able to eat pig and do whatever they want. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want. So they want to be in a place, and Am Chovshi, they want to be a free nation, quote unquote. A free nation, not to be persecuted from other nations, but a free nation to be able to do what they want. Meaning free from Torah mitzvahs. Right? So if that's the case, they don't want people to keep Torah mitzvahs. Or Rebbe or Moshe Schneider, bless him memory, wanted to come emigrate, and they didn't want them. They said, we don't need your old Jews and your old Jewish values. They didn't want. We're new, we're the new Israel, blah, blah, blah. We don't need these old laws. They didn't take them. They didn't want them. So he said, you fools. I'm coming to sanctify the land. I'm coming to bring Torah to the land. To sanctify it. Yeah, you don't want to be sanctified? Land will spit you out. And very well could. Hard to imagine today, but still. We don't do what we're supposed to do, as my Rebbe always says. Says, I'm not afraid of anybody in Iran or anywhere else. Not afraid of what they could do or whatever. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of Jews who live in the land of sin. Now, if they live outside the land, they say it's also bad. No one's saying it's not bad, but if they do it in the land, it's worse. Worse. 10 times worse. 10 times worse. So that being the case, what do you expect? You have thousands and thousands of Jews who've been inculcated and brainwashed by secular society. They tell stories from the Torah, like from a fairy tale perspective, and their kids know nothing. So for generations, generations of kids don't know anything. Nothing about their own heritage. Someone told me they were at the Western Wall, and Monday and Thursday at bar mitzvahs there. So they took out a Torah scroll. A kid asked his father, never saw a Torah scroll. Never saw a Torah scroll. Just before YouTube. Yeah, never saw a Torah scroll. If you tell me he lived in Timbuktu somewhere in the sticks, the boonies, as we would say, or the boondocks somewhere. A kid grew up there. knew he was Jewish but didn't know anything. Okay, I can understand. You want to tell me an Israeli kid never saw a Sefer Torah? Never saw a Torah scroll in his life? It's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. I mean, the level of education that they have is awful when it comes to Torah, right? There's somebody that wanted to teach once a week in a secular school, so they made him sign a document. He's not going to try and be makar, draw them close. So this is fine. I'll just speak about Jewish concepts and whatever. So it was before Shavuot, and they had a whole assembly. There were like 400 kids there. The principal's there, and so this rabbi gets up. The rabbi gets up and he's talking about giving the Torah on Sinai, and he says, whatever he's talking about, the importance of our prophets, and he's speaking about Tehillim. So he asked them again. These are Israeli kids, and he asked them the following question, and the question was, who wrote the Book of Psalms? That's what he asked. Nobody knew the answer. Nobody knew the answer. His principal didn't know where to hide. Totally embarrassed. Nobody knew the answer. So I said, okay, let me give you a hint. So I'll give you a hint. And he said, David. And they all said, Ben Gurion. David Ben Gurion wrote Tehillim? Wrote the Book of Psalms? This one's like, yeah, you can come every week. You can come every week. Like, give them a little bit of education. They didn't know who wrote the Book of Tehillim. Now, you want to tell me, secular Jew, you ask them that? Wherever they live? They might not know. Probably many of them don't know. You want to tell me this really kid knows Hebrew? Can read Hebrew? It's gone through Tanakh. Yeah, at some level. Even they teach him as a fairy tale. Doesn't know that King David wrote Tehillim. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. To say the least. They have tens of thousands. They have millions of people here don't know Shema Yisrael. I mean, it's tremendous truth movement. People coming back, that's for sure. But the ignorance is unbelievable, right? They're just spoon fed whatever schools teach them, whatever the media says, and they have no idea. Like a lot of people like barely came in contact with anyone like really religious. Like they have all these stereotypes, crazy things, and you can't even make this up. But not to know David Amelech is mind-boggling. If you'd asked me growing up as a kid, who was David Amelech, I would have no idea. No idea whatsoever. Yeah. Wasn't something, it could be we were taught when I was younger, in Hebrew school. Maybe. Maybe. Maybe, maybe it was taught and I don't remember. Okay. That's growing up in the middle of nowhere. Where at best you had, my parents' synagogue, 75 families. Like that was like in the heyday. Like that was already a huge thing. That was already a big thing. But like kids know nothing. Some of the kids that I went to Hebrew school still know nothing. I still know absolutely nothing. How do I know? Spoken to them. Still don't know anything. Yeah, I mean it's mind-boggling the ignorance. How many people I know, my age. Yeah, aging myself here a little bit. From the age of bar mitzvah, 13. Yeah. How many took any extracurricular classes in Jewish studies that I know of? Very few, if any. If any. So what does that tell you? That's what's going to happen. That is what's happened in America. They know nothing. They know absolutely zero. What is it? Tell me in Israel? Kids growing up in Israel? Kid never saw a Sefer Torah? We're talking about brainwashing. Never saw a Sefer Torah. I'll tell you another story. One of my rabbis, the Blessed Mary, told me there was somebody, I don't know exactly how they got to one of his kids' brisses, circumcision. This guy was there. I know. I said, I don't remember exactly how he got there. When they brought the baby in, he had no clue. He's a Jew. He brought up as a Jew. He had no clue what they were going to do to this baby. No clue. Now, this rabbi of mine, he told me his parents really gave him no Jewish education. Just the opposite. Yeah. Gave him nothing. Gave him zero. Didn't even know what circumcision was. I would think anyone associated with the synagogue should know what circumcision is. This guy was out to lunch. Totally out to lunch. Never heard of such a thing. Yeah. I mean, forget about Shabbos and other things. I would think that would be like a little more obvious. Like, no, a lot of people have heard circumcision, even as secular as they are, but there are people that, don't even know what circumcision is. Yeah, someone here mentions, I would have thought it wouldn't be even possible to buy pork in Israel. It's funny, in a certain way, that who are the biggest importers of pork here? Russians. That's my Rebbe. I mean, most of them not Jewish, by the way, but when I asked my Rebbe this question, I said, like, why of all, why of all people, like, can't give up pork? Not going to live without pork? He said you have to understand, if they're used to something, their body desires it. Body craves it, right? If their body craves it, they want it. So why shouldn't they have it? Why in the world shouldn't they have it? So, there are kashrus laws, but you can have pig here. Free enterprise. Yeah. It's kind of crazy thing you think about it. If it's a Jewish state, but again, a Jewish state does not mean a halachic state. Does not mean a state run according to Jewish law. Doesn't mean that. Right? That's not what they wanted. That's not how it was found. Right? Right? That's not how it was found. Right? If you read Herzl's book, that was his goal. His goal was not to have anything to do with Torah. That's why people say you got to be in the government, because if you weren't in the government, it'd be a lot worse. True? Right? I was arguing with somebody Friday night. That's true. So the minority opinion says you don't vote anyway. Why? Why? You don't vote, like my Rebbe would hold, because you're hanging out with people that not only desecrate Shabbos, but there's desecration of Shabbos going on in public places. And if you're a part of it, if you're a part of the government, it's like you're saying it's okay. Yeah, so obviously they're getting some sort of kickbacks. They're getting something where they're looking the other way for such a thing. Otherwise, just bring down the government. But the argument is, the vast majority say you have to vote. And if you don't vote, it'd be a lot worse, right? It's true. Right? But my argument was, nonetheless, still better to be in the opposition. Why? Because you have your name on Shabbos desecration. Who wants to have their name on Shabbos desecration? Who wants to have their name on Shabbos desecration? In other words, you're going to say, well, we're part of the government. We were making it better for the Jewish people in general. Very good. Yeah? So God's going to look the other way necessarily and say, oh, there was Shabbos desecration going under your nose and you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything to stop it. I don't know. That looks kind of bad. Right? But again, what was the other side of the argument? But they're providing a lot of services and that they wouldn't have if they weren't, if they weren't in power. If they weren't in the government. It's true. Not saying it's not true. But that doesn't negate the fact, they're standing on desecration of Shabbos. And they know it. And everybody knows it. So why don't they just leave the government? Because other things going on, obviously. Listen, they have their rabbinic authorities to tell them why they should be there, right? And why it's still okay. Okay. Yeah. They have their rabbinic authorities, maybe 10 times, billion times greater than I'll ever be in 10 lifetimes. Okay. But at the end of the day, they have their name on desecration of Shabbos. Yeah. Even for the greater good, you're allowed to do that? I don't think so. Brisker Rav wouldn't say such a thing. Yeah. Rebbe wouldn't say such a thing. Chazon Ish wouldn't say such a thing. I mean, they're great rabbis wouldn't say that. The vast majority would. The vast majority would. Okay. They say you're in the minority. Very good. But that doesn't change anything. That doesn't change the fact a person has their name on desecration Shabbos. Yeah. And they're going to get it, how God's going to judge it, I don't know. But I would think it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. But I would agree if Jews weren't there, if Orthodox Jews weren't in the government or part of the government, it would be a lot worse. It's true. Not denying that. Yeah, but that doesn't mean they don't have their name on desecration Shabbos. It's bad. Yeah. Someone asked about pork again. Who would you say the biggest importers of pork? Russians. Ruskies. Russians are the biggest importers of pork. Yeah. Not something they're willing to live without. So they make a big push for it. That's what I asked the question. Like what? They can't give it up? But that's the whole point. If this garbage is in your system, you want more of it. You want a lot more of it. Yeah, it's very hard to get out of your system. That's why anyone becoming religious, what's the first thing they tell them? They tell them you got to start keeping kosher and you have to start keeping Shabbos. Keeping kosher to get this garbage out of your system, because if you don't get this garbage out of your system for a Jew, it has a negative effect, right? Even if science hasn't proven it, it's got a negative effect. If it's got a negative effect, it makes somebody apathetic. Someone who's apathetic, very hard to teach them Torah. Impossible. Right? I shouldn't say impossible. Very, very hard to teach them Torah. Because they are totally apathetic. It dulls the spirit, the Gemara said. It dulls the spirit. So regardless of whether science is proven or not, that's what the Gemara said. Not the only reason for kashrus, but that's one reason. It dulls the spirit. Doesn't affect non-Jews like a Jew. Okay. Now, even if that's true, so you tell them they got to start keeping kosher and they have to start keeping Shabbos. Because Shabbos, we say, right, Friday night, we read the Genesis chapter 2. Beginning of Genesis chapter 2, God created the heaven and the earth, right? It stopped creating, right? Stopped creating, created Shabbos. Very good. Very good. So therefore, it's like God created the world. So if you don't keep Shabbos, it's like you deny God created the world. So that's another thing they should start keeping, right? Those are two things that they should start keeping that'll help the person get in the right direction. But if you don't get that garbage out of your system, then you can't hear Torah. You won't want to listen to Torah. You'll be very cynical. You'll be very apathetic. And someone who's apathetic, it's like, my language is like trying to start a Jeep with a 9-volt. They're like, it's going to be very hard. It's not impossible, right? Almost impossible. They don't want to hear Torah. They don't care if it's true or not true. Even if you can prove it to them, they don't care. They just want to do what they want to do. They want to go according to their base desire. That's what they want. It's 100% what they want. But very hard. Somebody like that trying to teach them Torah is not interested. They have no interest. And what's the reason? What's the main reason? Because they got this garbage in their system. The exact reason. That's the exact reason. It affects the person, right? So the more it affects them, the harder it is to fight, right? The harder it is to fight against, right? And the more it's part of you, the more a person desires it, right? Now, can a person stop cold turkey? They can, right? But again, how is the person going to listen to Torah if you don't? It's going to be very hard, right? Very, very hard. And for some people, it's a hard struggle. It's a hard struggle. There's so many products today that are kosher that, you have imitations of so many things that are traits that, like, you're not missing anything, right? I mean, okay, it could be chemically made and totally unhealthy and kill you in the process. But at the end of the day, what do you have? You have so many products, you're not missing anything. You're not missing anything. So what does the person have to give up? You say, oh, a person likes shrimp and other things. Okay, they got the stuff. It's not shrimp, right? Fish. Obviously, it's fish to make it, dress it up in a certain way, put certain spices on it, whatever it is. You're not missing. Nobody's missing anything. At the end of the day, you got M&Ms that are kosher today. Someone said, what would make M&Ms not kosher? So one thing was they had a red dye. You know where the red dye came from? A red ant. Someone said, not true. I said, look it up. I said, see if I'm bluffing. That was one of the reasons. They don't use red ant, red dye from ants. I said, really? I said, are you a chemical expert in food? You know how to eat food? Okay. That'll make you an expert in the chemicals that go in it. That was one of the things that made M&M's not kosher. They said, I can't believe we eat, red ants. I said, you'd be shocked at what goes into food. Yeah, you'd be absolutely shocked. If you know what went into food half the time, you wouldn't eat it. You wouldn't eat anything processed, right? 100%. 100%, you wouldn't eat anything processed. But if it's a lot bugs, this, that, oh, come on. People are eating bugs all the time. They're not even aware because they don't check. You know, you want to eat raw broccoli? Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I mean, plenty of bugs in there, totally infested. Yeah, plenty of things that are infested, but they don't check. 'Cause I've never seen a bug. I've never seen a bug in anything. Okay, did you ever check? Just because you never saw it doesn't mean it's not there. Yeah, I'm not saying they're microscopic. They could certainly be there. Certainly could be there, right? But again, even let's say a person didn't eat so many bugs. But if if you're eating non-kosher, it has an effect. It makes a person apathetic. You have so many secular Jews that are apathetic, right? You need like a nuclear bomb to go off in front of them before they start to wake up. Some people have woken up, other people still asleep, and they'll be asleep till they die, right? Hopefully not, but you know, it's a horrific thing. Some people will wake up. I definitely think some people will wake up, but I think a lot of people just there's nobody home, and there won't be anybody home. And it's unfortunate, but what did Bernard Shaw say? 2% think, 3% think they think, 95% rather die than think. People don't think. They're not interested in thinking today. Nobody wants to think. Nobody in their right mind wants to think because it's too depressing. Life in general is too depressing. So why think? Then you hear like rabbinic scholars, get killed in a terrorist attack, and someone says, "Oh, see, that's Torah. That's the merit for learning Torah. What a waste! What a waste!" You die sanctifying God's name. Yeah, but even if you tell me, I got someone tell me, when I die, I'm going 6 feet under. I said, well, I hope for your sake you're right, because if I'm right, I said I think you're in serious trouble. And that's about life after death and whatever. He said, tell me what that means in the soundbite. So I said, yeah, I'll send you a link. I don't know if they watched it, they didn't watch it, but I said, even if what you say is true, even if a person dies, God forbid, they die and nothing happens. They die like a dog. No dog in heaven. Yeah, they die like a dog. Okay. So if they die like a dog and nothing happens, you're going to say, see, what if there's nothing there? Okay, let's say it's true. I don't believe it, but let's say it's true. Even if it would be true, is there any possible way to live a more moral life than this? A life with more meaning? No. So even if you wouldn't get reward, which we don't deserve reward anyway, right? God gives it, as the Chosam Vava says, as a chesed. It's an act of loving kindness, right? He gives you the hudzi. As we always say, right? So Dixie cup, anyone from Boston knows. Dixie cup made of chocolate and vanilla ice cream with a wooden spoon, made from a company called Hood, right? The hoodsie, right? We grew up on hoodsies. Very good. God's going to say, I'm going to give you the hoodsie. Why did you deserve the hoodsie? You have an obligation to keep the Torah mitzvahs as a Jew, right? God's going to give you a benefit. He's going to give you a reward. Why does he have to give you the hoodsie? Says the Chosam Vava. You know why? Because God is a meitiv. God wants to do chesed. He wants to act of loving kindness. Does he have to? No. So why does he give you the hoodsie? Because he wants to do an act of loving kindness. He doesn't have to. Not obligated by any stretch. He gives it to us because it's an act of loving kindness. Yeah. So even if we wouldn't get reward, right? The Mr. Pirkei Avos says, what's the highest level? You serve God without getting reward. Absolutely without getting reward. But someone once told me, but you go ask your rabbis, everyone's doing it for reward. But even if we wouldn't do it for reward, the highest level, we know we'll get reward later. Okay, is that the only reason we're keeping it? Or we're keeping it because we believe it's true? Even with all the hardship and all the difficulty, we believe it's true. Very good. That's why we're going to keep it. Regardless of whether they get reward or not. But you're going to get reward. That's the only reason. That's the only reason. Right? It's a tremendous way of life. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's a tremendous way of life. It means every action I do, every thought I have means something. Even little me somewhere, an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. Right? My action matters. What I think matters. We don't live our lives like that. We should. But what we think and what we do matters. And that's the most important thing. Right? So you want to say, there's no reward. What if there's no reward? So what if there wasn't? Even if there wouldn't be. The fact is we're doing what God wants. We're living the most moral lives we can in a life that has absolute meaning in everything we say or do. That's huge. Any other quote unquote lifestyle have that? I don't know. The Buddhists will say they have it. The Christians will say they have it. The I don't know. Hindus will say they have it. Who knows what? But you know, that's what we believe. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna stop here. This every Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions? Find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, OrthodoxConversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos, Q&As, Ethics of Fathers, Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHIMCOFFMAN at